This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Susie Garrett. Brought to you by
TheStreet.com, interactive financial multimedia tools for an ever-changing financial world. Our dividend stock advisor guides and helps generate income during a period of low interest rates. Real Money helps you think through ideas for investing and trading stocks. Action Alerts Plus is a charitable trust portfolio that provides trade-by-trade strategies. Online, mobile, social media. We are TheStreet.com.
We pay all the taxes we owe, every single dollar. We don't stash money on some Caribbean island.
A defiant Apple CEO on Capitol Hill defending his company's tax strategy as billions of dollars sit overseas.
It's a lie by omission.
Mr. Hatch, I did not lie.
You what?
I did not lie, sir.
A defiant IRS executive also on Capitol Hill disputing allegations he kept the practice of targeting conservative groups a secret from Congress.
And our series on the future of healthcare kicks off tonight with a look at how supercomputers are revolutionizing the way we treat cancer. All that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Tuesday, May 21st.
New milestones for the Dow and the S&P 500 today. They stand at new record highs. On Wall Street, stocks got a big boost after two top Federal Reserve Bank presidents says they don't expect the central bank to ease back on its massive bond buying program just yet. They also said when the time is right, the Fed will adjust its buying of assets up or down as needed. Well, investors liked what they heard. The Dow stocks added 52 points and scoring another record by making gains for the 19th Tuesday in a row. A lot of people keeping on that Tuesday watch. The Nasdaq edged up 2 points and the S&P added 5 points.
Well, Susie, politics and business met head-on Capitol Hill today, and it made for riveting theater. The issue, Apple Computer's tax practices and whether the company uses gimmicks to avoid paying its fair share. In feisty Senate testimony today, CEO Tim Cook defended Apple's practice of storing profits in overseas subsidiaries, most notably in Ireland. A Senate report says Apple's tactics helped it pay little or no tax anywhere on at least $74 billion in income over the past 4 years. Eamon Javers was there for every minute of today's contentious events and joins us now from Washington. Eamon?
Hi, Tyler. Well, we expected some fireworks, as you say, at this hearing today. What we didn't expect is that we would get those fireworks before Tim Cook even began to testify. There was a dispute here between Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky and Senator Carl Levin, the chairman of this committee. Rand Paul said that he didn't even think this hearing should have been called in the first place. Take a listen.
Frankly, I'm offended by the tone and tenor of this hearing. I'm offended by a $4 trillion government bullying, berating, and badgering one of America's greatest success stories. If anyone should be on trial here, it should be Congress. I frankly think the committee should apologize to Apple. I think that the Congress should be on trial here for creating a bizarre and Byzantine tax code.
Senator Paul, you're, of course, free to apologize if you wish. You can apologize to anyone you want. This subcommittee is not going to apologize to Apple. We did not drag them in front of this subcommittee.
So you see Carl Levin not in the mood there to apologize to Apple. And in fact, he did not apologize to Apple. Instead, he drilled down on some very specific and at times uncomfortable questions for the Apple executives who were there, including Tim Cook. Take a listen to that.
You point out, and accurately so, Mr. Cook, that 95% of the creativity that goes into those products is in California, but 2/3 of the profits are in Ireland. And you've made a decision, which you have a right to do, not to bring that money home.
Senator, we're proud that all of our R&D, or the vast majority of it, is in the United States.
I know, but the profits that result from it are sitting in Ireland in a corporations that you control that don't pay taxes. You ought to be proud.
So some tense moments there, tense moments between these senators. And Tyler, politically an interesting moment here was when Senator John McCain had to jump in and sort of leap to the defense of Carl Levin here, his Democratic colleague. John McCain, of course, a Republican former presidential candidate. Tyler.
All right, Eamon, it's Susie here. You know, a lot of tough conversation back and forth. How do you think Apple came out through all of this, and Tim Cook in particular? Do you think Apple's reputation was hurt by this hearing today?
Susie, I don't. I think that there was less damage done here to Apple than a lot of folks in Washington expected, particularly given the tough revelations in that Senate report that came out last night. The Senate report said that Apple had actually created 3 companies around the world that were not legal tax residents of any country anywhere in the world. That was the first time these Senate investigators had ever seen anything like that. Given that Senate report, Apple came off pretty light today. A lot of people were heaping praise on the company and holding up their iPhones and saying how great they thought iPhone was.
Fascinating hearing to watch. Thank you so much, Eamon. Eamon Javers reporting from Washington. And coming up a little bit later in the program, how many other big corporations are taking advantage of tax loopholes and what's the impact? We'll discuss it with David Kochaneski of the New York Times. Tyler?
Well, Susie, Apple's Tim Cook wasn't the only CEO under fire today. Jamie Dimon, the chairman and CEO of JPMorgan Chase, faced a backlash from some of its company's own shareholders. They wanted to strip Dimon of his chairman title, saying the bank and Dimon himself needs more oversight following a $6 billion trading loss last year. But the effort failed, and Dimon gets to keep both titles. Kayla Tausche has more.
America's biggest bank is keeping its larger-than-life leader. Jamie Dimon, chairman and CEO of JPMorgan Chase since 2006, is holding on to both of those titles despite a proposal by some shareholders to split them. 32% of shareholders voted for it. That's far fewer than supported the same move last year, coming right as the bank disclosed a gaping trading loss.
Compared to last year, I thought it was an easier meeting for a number of reasons. I think, this wasn't the size. The London Whale $6 billion loss was huge, and so that's material and substance. And obviously, they already knew what the votes were on the question of separation and CEO. So I think that probably relaxed everybody up there, because 40% last year and this year 32%.
There have certainly been other troubles at the House of Dimon. Currently, no fewer than 8 regulators investigating the firm over trading, wrongful foreclosures, debt collections, and more. Appointing an independent chairman was how 4 pension funds said the company could ease concerns the board was doing too little to keep Dimon and his deputies in check. But 2 weeks ago, a new fear emerged. Strip Dimon of one title, and he'll resign from both.
We expected a higher vote this year, and I think it became a referendum on Jamie Dimon and his leadership, and it was never intended as a referendum on Jamie Dimon and his leadership. It was about putting an independent chairman in place. I think by making it about Jamie Dimon, they did deflect votes away from him, but those votes landed against the directors on the risk committee. Meaning
the bank won the battle, but not the war. An overhaul at the board level could be near. 3 members of the board's risk committee barely won approval. Lead director Lee Raymond, formerly of ExxonMobil, said issues there must be addressed. JPMorgan shares, though, rising to highs not seen since before the financial crisis, as investors breathed easy that Dimon would stay. Still, the war may be over at the $200 billion bank, but similar battles rage on in boardrooms across the nation.
This is a major event in terms of shareholder rights. Shareholder rights is at a tipping point. And so this is just one step of many that are likely to happen over the next few years.
Kayla Tausche, Nightly Business Report, Tampa, Florida.
So JPMorgan does keep restive shareholders at bay, at least for now, but no question, investors are speaking up more and more about how companies govern themselves and whether having a single person as chairman and CEO is an inherent conflict of interest.
Turning to other news, at least 24 dead and hundreds more injured. That's the toll so far from that devastating tornado that ripped through the town of Moore, Oklahoma. President Obama promised the victims that the American people and the U.S. government will be there for them. Jane Wells saw the damage firsthand and has the latest developments and what some businesses are doing to help. Jane?
Thunderstorms and hail throughout much of the day made it very difficult to continue searching here, let alone begin the recovery. But here at City Hall, late in the afternoon, officials said they believe that they have accounted for nearly all of the missing from a tornado that has now been upgraded by the Weather Service to the most powerful category, an EF5. And the economic toll will be catastrophic.
It'll be billions, billions of dollars, I believe, because of all the tremendous amount of structures and certainly the interruption of business in this area. And it's going to take a long time to get all this cleaned up, to rebuild the structures. We had 5 schools that were hit with this storm, and we lost several schools totally. The hospital was hit, a huge movie theater was hit, many different facilities and buildings. A bank was destroyed.
Now, as the recovery and the rebuilding begins, an army of National Guardsmen, FEMA, and others will be joined by the private sector. Volunteers with extra supplies from Lowe's, $1 million from Home Depot, which is also letting first responders use its store as a command center here in Moore, Oklahoma. Water's being trucked in from Walmart, portable cell towers from Verizon Wireless, and a reported $6 million+ pledge from Oklahoma's large energy companies. And Oklahoma City Thunder star player Kevin Durant is contributing $1 million to the city he's adopted. For Nightly Business Report, Jane Wells, Moore, Oklahoma.
And coming up a little later in the program, we're going to show you some new ways that companies are helping to keep cell phones charged during the Oklahoma crisis and also in everyday life.
Still ahead, senators were on the attack and IRS officials were firing back during the latest hearing into the scandal at the agency. But do we know more now than we did before? First, though, some stocks that closed at 52-week highs today.
What did the former head of the IRS know, and when did he know it? Those are the key questions lawmakers asked Douglas Shulman at a Senate Finance hearing today regarding the tax agency subjecting conservative political groups seeking tax-exempt status to extra scrutiny. John Harwood joins us now from Capitol Hill with the latest. Over to you, John.
Well, he said he didn't know much. That's the short version of what he told the Senate Finance Committee. We didn't learn very much new from Doug Shulman or from Stephen Miller, who replaced him as the acting IRS commissioner until President Obama fired him last week. Steve Miller did acknowledge that he was the one who orchestrated that planted question at a bar conference that resulted in the disclosure of this in advance of the IG report. And he took some flack from senators on the committee for not having corrected the record after earlier IRS officials had said the targeting had not taken place.
You didn't mention any of this in your responses to me, to the Senate, or to any other congressional body. Now, Mr. Miller, that's a lie by omission. There's no question about that in my mind. It's a lie by omission.
Mr. Hatch, I did not lie.
You what?
I did not lie, sir.
You lied by omission. You knew what was going on. You didn't, and you knew that we had asked. You should have told us.
Now, we don't expect to get much news tomorrow either at the House Oversight Committee, but that doesn't mean it won't be a bad day for the White House, because we've just heard that IRS official Lois Lerner plans to take the Fifth Amendment against the against self-incrimination. That has the potential for lending an air of criminality to something that the Inspector General didn't even find partisan in its motivation, much less criminal.
So, John, let me ask you a question about the fact that the White House counsel, one of the things we've learned, I think, since last week, was that the White House counsel was aware of some of the contents of an Inspector General's report for at least a couple of weeks before that information was made public. Is that likely to come up and continue to keep the coals burning under this scandal?
It'll come up, but I don't think it's significant, Tyler, because the IG report had not come out, and we're simply talking about a delay of a couple of days or a discrepancy of a couple of days in when they were notified about something that was about to come out, and the White House couldn't do anything, as Jay Carney keeps saying over and over, until the IG report came out anyway. It's not about the underlying conduct, why it happened, what motivated it.
And tomorrow, an IRS official presumably going to take the Fifth Amendment. Very interesting. John Harwood, thank you very much. Well, we begin tonight's market focus with a number of big retailers out with earnings. Home Depot reported better than expected results, even raised its full-year sales and profit outlooks. The world's largest home improvement chain credits the recovery in U.S. housing for the boost. The results sent the stock to an all-time high, closing 2.5% higher in today's session. It sits at $78.71.
Shares of Saks also rose after reporting better than expected quarterly results. The upscale department store said sales at stores open at least a year were well above estimates. The company is in the middle of a multi-year, multi-million-dollar effort to close underperforming stores, upgrade its computer systems, and improve online sales. The stock jumped more than 11% to $13.67 and then moved higher in after hours trading on an unconfirmed report of a possible sale. Well, it was a different story at Best Buy. The nation's biggest electronics retailer reported a loss last quarter after selling its stake in Best Buy Europe. Excluding that European sale, Best Buy posted a profit that did beat analysts' forecasts. But investors still dumped the stock on concerns about stiff competition from companies like Amazon. Best Buy fell more than 4% today to $25.64.
Carnival shares also near the bottom of the S&P 500 today after a pair of analyst downgrades. This comes a day after the cruise ship operator cut its full-year forecast for the second time in less than 3 months. That follows, of course, a string of highly publicized incidents aboard its ships, forcing the company to lower ticket prices to attract more passengers. Shares fell more than 4% today. They finished at $33.81. Well, as we mentioned earlier, Apple CEO Tim Cook fielded a lot of heated questions about the company's tax strategies today. And in fact, the corporate tax code itself was a subject of great debate. Our next guest is here to shed light on what he says are big loopholes at Apple and at tech companies in general. David Kochaneski is a business reporter at the New York Times. He's won Pulitzer Prizes for his coverage of Apple and for a series on corporate tax havens. David, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
You know, Mr. Cook today said, quote, Apple pays all the taxes we owe, every single dollar. Have they?
I think they have. I think the question here is not a question of legality, but a question of pushing the envelope. And that's when, if you looked at the hearings, there's a lot of discussions about when is a company a shell company, when is it a real company, when is money that's held in U.S. banks by Apple affiliates considered offshore income. So you get into the vagaries and the arcane bits of the tax code, and it becomes a matter of, you know, how much should you pay, and should you pay? Is it fair for a corporation that has gotten as much out of the U.S. as Apple to pay as little as it does?
You know, David, I think what it all comes down to is the $2 trillion that is held overseas by American companies that have made these profits in other countries. And how do you get that money back here? That's the core of all of this. And so business leaders like Tim Cook are saying, you know, give us a lower tax rate. He was proposing single digits. Others have other, you know, tax holidays, stuff like that. What can the U.S. do to incentivize these companies to bring that money back?
Well, I think there's a question, a policy question about how much should they do to incentivize it? You know, the money is over there overseas. The companies could bring it back by paying the stated tax rate. And if you want to give them a break, in 2004, they were allowed a 5% tax rate rather than 35%. The question then becomes, does that give them an unfair competitive advantage with all the U.S. companies that cannot afford to offshore their tax, their earnings? So I think that is a question. And in 2004, I think $300 billion was brought back at a reduced rate. There was a big promise that was going to lead to hiring and investment in the U.S. In fact, just the opposite happened. The companies that brought the most back laid off workers, and a study later showed that 92 cents on the dollar was not sent to investment. It was given back to shareholders, which is fine. But if the inducement to doing it is that it's some sort of stimulus, there's a question: why should taxpayers give a break to these shareholders?
You're of the point of view, it would seem from your first answer, that Apple did in fact pay what it owed, but took advantage of gaps in both Irish and American tax law. If Apple was living up to the letter of those laws and availing itself of the letter of the law, on the other hand, did it live up to the spirit of the law, in your view?
Well, I think that's the question. And what the report pointed out was that Apple's, by having these entities offshore that are, technically in limbo, they're stateless companies that Apple says do not owe taxes to any country, even though they're incorporated in Ireland. They have part ownership in the British Virgin Islands. All the decision making is done in the U.S., but they say this is stateless, so we don't owe any taxes. I think, the common sense sniff test says, is that right? And the report said that all the very highly sophisticated techniques that Apple used made us save the company $10 billion a year in taxes in the U.S. and elsewhere.
All right, David, thank you very much. David Kochaneski of the New York Times.
And coming up on the program, there's a new front in the war on cancer, and a key player here is Watson. This is the supercomputer of IBM, and he's doing things never done before to treat the disease. But first, let's get a check on how commodities, treasuries, and currencies fare today.
For millions of us, smartphones have become a lifeline for phone calls, texts, emails, and access to the web. But what happens when your phone battery runs low or out and you can't recharge it, like so many people in Oklahoma today? They're unable to do that. Some big companies are working on ways to keep those devices fully charged and keep them working longer. John Ford has more now from the annual CTIA Wireless Convention in Las Vegas.
At this time, it's going to go just north.
When disaster strikes, communication is a lifeline. People need their smartphones to keep connected to the outside world and stay on top of the latest developments. That's led today's relief organizations to try supplying more than water and shelter. These days, disaster relief means taking care of your technology, too. This is the American Red Cross's new prototype of their emergency response vehicle. Inside, you can charge your gadgets by USB, and you've got Wi-Fi. The Red Cross's current fleet doesn't have the wireless and power stations. The organization plans to have about 24 of the newer trucks in service by year end.
You know, it's important when your life has been turned upside down to have contact with the outside world, to know that there are people out there that are caring for you and wanting to help you.
To be prepared, shoppers can find a few gadgets that can be extra useful during natural disasters. This one, the Adventure Kit from Goal Zero, uses solar power to charge phones and tablets, less than $150. When the sun isn't out, there are external batteries from companies like iWalk and Duracell that cost $100 or less. They charge a phone 1 or 2 times and hold a charge for several weeks. That's become especially important today when we rely on so many gadgets.
Because batteries are so limited and the gap between the phone's performance and what the battery is able to provide is only increasing, then having actually an infrastructure, think of it like ATM machines, for example, or gas stations.
And the goal, of course, is to stay connected, especially important during times like these. For Nightly Business Report, I'm John Ford.
During a crisis, battery power and overloaded cellular infrastructure can be issues, as it was following that tornado in Oklahoma. And that is why all the major carriers recommend that those in impacted areas of emergencies text rather than make phone calls.
And finally tonight, another story of technology helping out. This time, big data could reap big benefits. A recent study says the use of real-time analytics could cut healthcare costs up to 15% annually. That works out as much as $500 billion a year. And now there's a push by private businesses to help medical researchers collect data and treat patients. So we kick off a new series on the future of healthcare tonight with how IBM's Watson computer is helping doctors at the forefront of battling cancer. Bertha Coombs reports.
How are you doing?
So many cancers we don't have a good result in today. Not enough people are cured. People are hurt by our therapies, and we got to find a better way.
Mark Chris is Chief of Thoracic Oncology at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center.
There are some 3-drug regimens that contain a targeted agent.
Oncologists from Sloan Kettering have been working with IBM to turn Watson, the cognitive computer famous for winning at Jeopardy, into a tool to help doctors provide the best cancer treatment options for patients.
They would be getting 2 agents. They'd be getting potentially a chemotherapy and Herceptin or trastuzumab.
To train Watson, this last year the team ingested more than 2.5 million pages of cancer data, written text from medical journals, clinical trial research, and 1,500 case files.
Teaching the system how to read the medical records and medical reports, which is not a simple task.
Dr. Chris says Watson's ability to literally learn from each set of recommendations was one thing that surprised him.
And the second thing is just totally counterintuitive, that this machine is ultimately going to improve the care of each person. I mean, it's going to be the ultimate in personalized medicine.
Also counterintuitive, says IBM's Manoj Saxena, Watson's gotten smaller, using less server hardware while getting smarter.
We reduced it down first to about this size, at about 2 racks server side.
Analysts say with the rising cost of cancer medications, there's a big push towards more evidence-based medical care. Saxena says Watson gives providers overwhelmed by data the evidence they need.
So it's humanly impossible for the doctors to pull all of the medical records, the pathology reports, your family history, the most recent diseases and drugs that have supposed to have done, and to bring it together at the point of treatment. That's where Watson as a decision support system, we believe, will have breakthrough implications.
Until now, Watson has been used with file cases. This summer, beta testing begins with patients in real time. If the trial goes well, the commercial product should launch for cancer care providers by 2014. In New York, I'm Bertha Coombs for Nightly Business Report.
Tomorrow in part 2 of our series, Bertha takes a look at how real-time data could be a game changer for improving patient care. But that's it for us tonight. Nightly Business Report. I'm Susie Garrow. Thanks so much for joining us.
And I'm Tyler Matheson. Thanks from me as well. Have a great evening, everybody, and we hope to see you back here tomorrow night.
Nightly Business Report has been brought to you by
TheStreet.com, interactive financial multimedia tools for an ever-changing financial world. Our dividend stock advisor guides and helps generate income during a period of low interest rates. Options Profits helps educate beginning and seasoned options traders. Action Alerts Plus is a charitable trust portfolio that provides trade-by-trade strategies. Online, mobile, social media, we are TheStreet.com.
I'm Susie Garrow with a Nightly Business Report news brief. Fresh record highs for the Dow and the S&P 500 today after 2 top Federal Reserve officials said they don't expect the central bank to ease back on its bond buying program just yet. That helped the Dow add 52 points, the Nasdaq edged up 2, and the S&P added 5 points. Apple CEO Tim Cook got grilled by a Senate panel over the use of loopholes to avoid paying billions in corporate taxes. JPMorgan Chase shareholders rejected a bid to split Jamie Dimon's roles as the bank's chairman and CEO. Estimates for damage from Monday's Oklahoma tornado run as high as $4 billion. And Microsoft unveiled the new Xbox One, an all-in-one entertainment system for games, TV, movies, and the internet. Be sure to tune into Nightly Business Report right here on your public television station.